بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله العظيم من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله تعالى فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له له الملك وله الحمد يحيي ويميت وهو حي لا يموت بيده الخير وهو على كل شيء قدير وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله وصفيه وخليله أدى الأمانة وبلغ الرسالة ونصح للأمة وكشف الغمة وتركنا على المحجة البيضاء ليلها كنهارها لا يزيغ عنها إلا هالك فعليه أفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم وعلى آله وصحبه ومن استنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين اللهم اجعلنا منهم ومن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر آمين يا رب العالمين. وأوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله عز وجل وقد أمرنا بالحق وقال تعالى يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. ثم أما بعد. We begin by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, bearing witness that none has the right to be worshipped except for Him and none has the right to be unconditionally obeyed except for Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is His final messenger who was sent as a mercy to all of the world and a guide for mankind. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send His peace and blessings upon Him, His family, His companions, and those that follow until the day of judgment. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us amongst them. Allahumma ameen. Dear brothers and sisters, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam many times was asked this question, Mata sa'a? When is the hour? When is the hour? When is the hour? And it's interesting because the Prophet ﷺ would be asked the same question by many different people. And it wasn't necessarily just this question. Just generally speaking, as Rasulullah ﷺ is asked various questions, the Prophet ﷺ gives a different answer to the same question depending on who the person asking is. And so when it comes to this question of Mata sa'a, O Messenger of Allah, when is the hour? The Prophet ﷺ could tell by looking at a person if that person was a procrastinator, if that person was someone that was trying to learn the signs so that, as long as these signs have not taken place yet, I can do whatever I want. So sometimes the Prophet ﷺ one time he pointed to a young boy, and he said the hour, or he said, you will meet a sa'a, you will meet your hour when that young boy's hair turns gray, by the time that young boy's hair turns gray. Meaning what? Death is your qiyamah anyway. Death is your judgment anyway. Another time the Messenger ﷺ said, and this happens multiple times, Rasulullah ﷺ would respond to the one who asked, ماذا عددت لها? What did you prepare for it? Okay, قدمت لها أو عددت لها. What did you put forth or what did you prepare for that hour? And in this situation, this is the hadith of Abu Dharr radiallahu ta'ala anhu in Sahih al-Bukhari. The Prophet ﷺ was giving a khutbah. And a man walked in and he said to the Prophet ﷺ, Mata sa'a? While the Prophet ﷺ was speaking, he asked him, when is the hour? And Rasulullah ﷺ ignored that man's question, obviously, because he was in the middle of a sermon, ﷺ. And then the Prophet ﷺ asked, Ayna sa'idu an-sa'a? Where is the one that asked about the hour? And he looked at him, and the Prophet ﷺ said, إِذَا ضُيِّعَتِ الْأَمَانَةِ فَانْتَظِرِ السَّاعَةِ. When trust, when amana is lost, when it's lost, the Prophet ﷺ used the word ضُيِّعَتِ. Okay? إِذَا ضُيِّعَتِ الْأَمَانَةِ فَانْتَظِرِ السَّاعَةِ. Whenever trust is lost, people cannot be trusted anymore, then know that the hour is near. And the man responded to the Messenger ﷺ and he said, what does that even mean? How will we know when trust is lost? And the Prophet ﷺ, he gave the greatest example of a loss of trust when he mentioned that those who would be placed in authority of you would be people of no trust, would be people who don't deserve to be there. They would betray their people. They would harm their people. So in essence, the loss of righteous leaders, the loss of righteous authority, because the greatest form of trust is authority. When a person is entrusted to be in the leadership of any human being. And in the Zawad, in the extensions of this narration, the narration of Ahmad, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that all the way from the leader to the person in his own home, being an unjust authority. Okay, so the concept of a good leader, the concept of a leader that can be trusted, that is the greatest form of aman. And obviously, what that means is when you look at the time of the Khulafa al-Rashideen, of the righteous Khulafa of this ummah, we find that they were concerned about those that were under them. They felt a sense of trust to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah had entrusted them with this group of people. Therefore, you find the narrations of Omar ibn Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu crying and saying, I fear that on the day of judgment, the donkey in al-Iraq will testify against me because its owner is overburdening. That sense of feeling that amana from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah has put these people, has put this creation in my trust. And there's something very significant about that, because this khutbah is not about leadership. Because we know that it is a principle, كَمَا تَكُونُ تَوَلُّ عَلَيْكُمْ, that as you are, you will have placed on top of you. When the people become corrupt, their leaders become corrupt as well. And subhanAllah, just think about what we see going on in the Muslim world today. You know, the Arab Spring, or this revival, if you will, this concept, this notion of having freedom and justice in the Middle East. Let's face it, even if the leaders were to be placed upon them and were to be trustworthy, if you go to the majority of the Muslim world, you have to worry more about being pickpocketed than any non-Muslim country. You have to worry about being robbed. You have to worry about being cheated in every single aspect of your life. So we cannot demand a change at the top per se. Not that we don't strive for justice at the leadership level, we do. But at the same time, we cannot expect, we can demand, but we cannot fully expect a change at the top until there's a change in the way that we deal with one another. And it is already hard enough to find someone that you can trust with the most basic things. So then how can we expect Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us trustworthy and righteous leaders when we deal with each other, with no sense of trust and with no sense of amana, with no sense of loyalty? And the Prophet ﷺ, it's interesting because Rasulullah ﷺ said in a hadith narrated by Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu in al-Bukhari, and he's speaking about his time. He said, "Nasu kal-ibil." He said, people are like camels. He said, بِكُلِّ مِئَةٍ, with every 100, لَن تَجِدْ رَاحِلَةً, you'll barely find one that is suitable for riding. Meaning what? It's very hard to find a person that you can depend on. Even the Prophet ﷺ is saying in his time, it's hard to find someone that you can really depend on. That's a very rare individual. 1 out of 100 in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. What about in our times? Okay, so finding someone that's dependable, finding someone that's trustworthy. And there's a direct connection to Iman. There's a direct connection to faith. Because when the people lose trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they can no longer be trusted. They start to cheat with their money because they think their rizq, they think their sustenance is in their hands. They don't feel accountable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala whenever someone entrusts them with something. So at the minute that they have an opportunity to take advantage of someone, they take advantage of that person. Because they don't believe that Allah is watching them and that Allah will hold them accountable. So there's no doubt that there's a direct connection between faith or the lack of faith and hypocrisy. And the Prophet ﷺ, when he mentioned in the famous hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu and also Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, that the signs of the hypocrite are 3. And in one narration, Rasulullah ﷺ said 4. إِذَا حَدَثَ, when he speaks, كَذِب, he lies. Meaning what? As long as I can deceive the person in front of me, I don't care that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there and watching me. As long as I can deceive the person in front of me and convince him that what I'm saying is right, then you know what? I'm going to say it. So when he speaks, he lies because he doesn't feel accountable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with his words. And the Prophet ﷺ said, وَإِذَا وَعِدَ أَخْلَفَ, when he makes you a promise, he will break that promise. What's going to hold that person to his promise if he doesn't feel accountable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and there are no consequences? How many times do you find an individual who refuses to fulfill his promise until you threaten him? Once he feels threatened, once he feels like there are some worldly circumstances, then he responds, then he will fulfill that trust, then he'll say, okay, fine, I'll do it. And the Prophet ﷺ said, وَإِذَا تُمِنَ خَانَ, whenever he is given a trust, he betrays that trust. Why? Because again, he doesn't feel accountable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you can trust him with whatever you want. You can tell him whatever secrets you want. But you know what? You can't trust that person. And the Prophet ﷺ said in another narration, وَإِذَا خَاصَمَ فَجَرَ. When he argues, he transgresses, he goes overboard. He doesn't maintain the proper bounds when he's arguing. He's not mild in his argumentation. Notice that all four of these signs of a hypocrite, of a munafiq with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mention some form of interaction with people. So the Prophet ﷺ said, فَهُوَ مُنَافِقٌ. And Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu in his narration, Rasulullah ﷺ said, وَإِن صَلَّى وَصَامَ وَزَعْمَ أَنَّهُ مُسْلِمٌ. Even if he prays and fasts and insists that he's a Muslim. And Abdullah bin Omar radiallahu ta'ala anhu said, if you look at this hadith, whatever share you have of these traits is your share of hypocrisy. So if you have one of these traits, then you have 25% of nifaq inside of you, hypocrisy inside of you. If you have all of them, then you are a total hypocrite. Whatever portion you have is your share of hypocrisy on the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's a very dangerous hadith. And we find that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam embodied the exact opposite of these negative traits. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam before Islam was known as what? As-Sadiq al-Amin. SubhanAllah. So the Prophet ﷺ was the opposite of a hypocrite even before revelation came to him. And we find that those people around him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they embodied these values of trust, of being dependable, of being loyal, because they feared Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So subhanAllah, we will find that these people would refuse to lie, even in times when it was permissible. You know, Imam Ahmad rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, لَوْلَا الْكَذِبْ حَرَامٌ. He said, even if kadhib was not haram, he said, لَوْلَا الْكَذِبْ حَلَال. He said, even if it was halal, even if it was not haram, and it was to be halal. Yeah, imagine, if lying was halal, he said, I still would not tell a lie. And this was before the fitna came to him, before he would be tortured. And the other scholars would tell Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, just lie about your beliefs. He went under 7 khulafa, being tortured under 7 leaders consecutively, because he refused to say a statement that they wanted him to say that would pollute our creed. And that is that the Quran is created and it is not the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the other ulama told him, وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. Don't kill yourselves. Allah says, don't kill yourselves. Go ahead, protect yourself. It's halal for you to do so now. And he said, no. He said, even if it's halal, I still wouldn't do it. He's so disturbed by this entire concept, this notion of lying, that even when it became halal for him, he still didn't lie. And we find that this was the case of the Sahaba and the Salaf, that they still would not lie, even whenever Rasulullah ﷺ had made it permissible for them to do so. They still wouldn't lie. This was their fitrah. This was their natural inclination towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and all of that was good. And the Prophet ﷺ said, وَإِذَا وَعَدَ أَخْلَفَ. When he makes a promise, he breaks that promise. And subhanAllah, we find Omar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu, it's a very interesting narration, because this is authentic. And Omar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, obviously, maintained a very prominent role in world politics in his time as Khalifa. I mean, the entire world knew who Omar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu was. They all knew his justice. They all admired him. Right? Omar radiallahu ta'ala anhu maintained a position of prominence in the sight of any human being that lived at his time. And subhanAllah, we find that particularly even when he was at war with Hurmuzan, the Persians, the Battle of Qadisiyah. Hurmuzan, who was the leader of the Persians, as he was brought to Medina, he said, I want to see Amir al-Mu'mineen, Umar ibn al-Khattab, and he was expecting to see this very pompous human being, this very pompous individual. What does Umar ibn al-Khattab look like? We've heard about how big he is and how great he is. He must be a very pompous individual. And they said, you'll either find him in the masjid or in his house. So he went to the masjid, he didn't find him. He went to the house, he didn't find him. Then they walked out and they saw Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, Amir al-Mu'mineen, the Khalifa of the Muslims, sleeping under a tree on his shoes, with no bodyguards. Not worried, because Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu did not do anything to violate anyone else. So subhanAllah, imagine the most powerful man in the world sleeping without bodyguards, taking a nap in the middle of the day, in the middle of everyone, under a tree. And Hurmuzan, who's used to a very pompous lifestyle and having all these bodyguards, He says to Umar, he says about Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he said some very beautiful words. He said, حَكَمْتَ فَعَدَلْتَ فَأَمِنْتَ فَنِمْتَ. He said, you ruled, and you ruled with justice. So Allah gave you security, so you were given security. And so you were able to just sleep out in the open this way. Now Hurmuzan though was captured. And Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu was going to execute Hurmuzan because of the wars that he waged against the Muslims. Even if he authored beautiful words of poetry, that doesn't get you off of the hook. And Hurmuzan was a very intelligent man. And he admired Umar radiallahu anhu so much after meeting with him. So Hurmuzan, as he's about to be killed, he says to Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, he says, can I have a glass of water? Just before I die, I want to drink some water. So Umar radiallahu anhu said, of course you can have a glass of water. So he gave him a glass of water. He held the glass of water. He said, am I safe? Do you promise me that I am safe until I finish drinking this glass? He said, yeah, sure, you're safe until you finish drinking this glass. Hurmuzan threw the glass on the ground and broke it. And he looked at Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu and said, you made a promise. You know, are you going to honor your promise or not? Now, any other leader would say, nice try, and just whatever. You know, it's not going to work. A person who's killed many Muslims, a person who was a transgressor, a person who was an oppressor, it's not going to work. You're not going to weasel your way out of this. But Umar radiallahu anhu feared Allah. So he calls Ali radiallahu anhu. And he calls Abu Ubaidah radiallahu anhu. And he calls the leaders of the ummah and he takes shura from them. What do I do? Am I allowed to kill him anyway, despite what he said? So some of them said, you know what? You know, in this situation, you can't because weighing the pros and the cons. Some of them said, no, you made a promise, you have to hold your promise. I mean, would this even be a conversation for anyone else? Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu decided after consulting with his shura, he said, you know what? I have to honor my promise. He went back to Hurmuzan. He said, you can go free. So they untied Hurmuzan, and Hurmuzan did something that was totally unexpected. Hurmuzan said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Hurmuzan, rahimahullah, is a tabi'i. People don't know that. You read the first part of history, the Battle of Qadisiyah, those types of things. He became a tabi'i. He became one of the second generation after the Sahaba. And Umar radiallahu anhu was shocked. He said, why didn't you just say that in the first place? He would have saved us from this entire episode. You know, we wouldn't have had to go through any of this if he would have just become Muslim. Hurmuzan said, no. He said, I didn't want people to say that I became Muslim just because I was scared. But what put that inside of him? You know, what is it that made him want to be Muslim anyway? It was the promise of Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, the justice of Umar, the amana of Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, that shocked him. Right? That completely baffled him. What is it with these people, this quality of people? So وَإِذَا وَعَدَ أَخْلَفَ. The hypocrite has no sense. The hypocrite will make promises right and left. He doesn't care. As long as he gets a chance to break those promises, he'll break them. Then Rasulullah said, وَإِذَا تُمِنَ خَانَ. When he's given an amana, he breaks that trust. And Rasulullah said in a hadith in al-Bukhari, and in Tirmidhi, Rasulullah said, إِذَا حَدَثَ الرَّجُلْ حَدِيثًا. When a person says something to you, ثُمَّ الْتَفَتَ, and then he turns away from you, فَهُوَ أَمَانَةٌ. It's a trust. It's a trust. When someone tells you a secret, and they clearly don't want anyone else to know about it, it is an amana. If you break it, then you are a hypocrite. That's a sign of hypocrisy inside of you. When someone tells you something, when someone sends you an email and they don't expect you to forward it to anyone, or to BCC, or to show their text message to someone, that's an amana. That's a trust from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That person didn't know that they were talking to more than you. It's a trust. So this is something that's very significant. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he was al-Amin. He was as-Sadiq qabla al-Nabi. Wa huwa al-Amin qabla al-Rasul. He was the truthful one before he became a prophet. And he was the trustworthy one even before he became a messenger. And you know, subhanAllah, in the Arabic language, this is something that's very important. You cannot reach a level of being Amin until you have a level of Sidq. You cannot become trustworthy unless you are truthful. People have to believe that you are a truthful person before they start trusting you in the first place. And that's exactly what the Messenger ﷺ achieved. To the point that even when they wanted to kill the Prophet ﷺ, I mean, put yourself in the shoes of the Prophet ﷺ. They're plotting to kill him. And they boycotted the Messenger ﷺ and his family. And his family, some of his closest family members, being Khadija radiallahu anha and Abu Talib, died as a result of that boycott. And they still knew that they couldn't find anyone else to trust with their belongings greater than the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ, even on the day he made hijrah, the day he ran away, he escaped from their persecution and from their plot to kill him. Even on that day, the Prophet ﷺ still had some of their trusts. He still had some of the things that were entrusted to him by his greatest enemies, and he was concerned. And he sent Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he appointed Ali radiallahu anhu to discharge that. I mean, a guy's trying to kill me, and I've got his watch, I'm going to keep his watch. The Prophet ﷺ is not like that. The Prophet ﷺ made sure each and every single amana, each and every single trust returned to its owner. Returned to its owner. And so the Prophet ﷺ established a reputation first of being sadiq, being a truthful man. Therefore, people knew that they could depend on him sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And if you lose that sense of truthfulness, you lose that sense of trustworthiness as well. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ, he said, هَلْ تَدْرُونَ مَنْ شِرَارُكُمْ? Do you know who the most evil of you are? The worst of you are? They said, who are they, Ya Rasulullah? They said, Allah wa Rasulahu a'lam. Allah and His Messenger. Allah wa Rasuluhu a'lam. Allah and His Messenger know best. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, شِرَارُكُمْ ذُو الْوَجْهَيْنِ. The worst amongst you are people with two faces. الَّذِي يَأْتِي هَؤُلَاءِ بِوَجْهِ وَهَؤُلَاءِ بِوَجْهِ. He comes to this group of people with a face and that group of people with a face. And it's very easy to be two-faced in this world because you have your online face and you have your on-site face. You have your text messaging face and you have your email face. You have so many different faces, and if there is a lack of consistency in those faces, in what you show to people, then know that that is a sign of hypocrisy. And the Prophet ﷺ said in an authentic hadith from Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, لَا يَنْبَغِي لِذِي الْوَجْهَيْنِ أَنْ يَكُونَ أَمِينًا. There is no way a person who is two-faced can be a trustworthy individual. It is absolutely impossible for someone who is used to being two-faced, who's used to saying one thing to one group of people and another thing to another group of people, who sits with someone, sits in their house, enjoys their food, sits with someone and enjoys conversation, smiles at them, says, Assalamu alaikum, peace be unto you. And then when they're with another person, they completely betray the individual that they were sitting with because they attack his honor. And his honor is more precious than his money. And you attack that because he's not there to watch you. And subhanAllah, when you become completely desensitized to that, where you will come back and you'll see that person the next day and you won't even feel guilt. Because it's a part of character. And it's a very, very bad habit that we really need to do away with. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and Imam Hassan al-Basri rahimahullah, combining these two traits, Imam Hassan al-Basri said, مَنْ نَقَلَ إِلَيْكَ حَدِيثًا فَاعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ يَنْقُلُ إِلَى غَيْرِكَ حَدِيثًا. A person who comes to you and says, hey, you know what that person said? Meaning he betrays the trusts of other people. Hey, you know what he said? You know what she said? Know that he carries your words to other than you. If he carries someone else's words to you, he carries your words to other than you. If he betrays other people's trust, then he will betray yours as well. Rasulullah ﷺ said in a hadith from Imran ibn Husayn, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, now Imran ibn Husayn, he says that I was with the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and he said the Prophet ﷺ stood up, and the Prophet ﷺ said, خَيْرُ أُمَّتِي الْقَرْنُ الَّذِي بُعِثْتُ فِيهِمْ. Another narration, qarni, right? The best ummah, the best generation from my ummah is the one in which I was sent. And the reason why in this narration the Prophet ﷺ particularly mentioned the one in which I was sent is to show his effect on them in regards to their trustworthiness and their honesty. Then he said, ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ, and Imran in his narration, he only says one time that the generation after me, another narration, Rasulullah ﷺ said, ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ, those that came after them, meaning the first three generations. Then the Prophet ﷺ said, ثُمَّ يَنْشَأَ أَقْوَامٌ يَشْهَدُونَ, then there will be a people that will testify, they'll give oaths, even when they're not asked to do so. They're not asked to do so. People who say, Wallahi, 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 Wallahi. Take the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in vain, without even caring about what they're saying. They say it so much. SubhanAllah, it's not, if it was about fasting 3 days or feeding 10 poor people or clothing 10 poor people, then we'd be broke because of how much we swear by the name of Allah. No, I promise, I testify. Wallahi, why do they say that? Because they don't take it seriously. They become accustomed to not fulfilling their promises and their trust. So the Prophet ﷺ said there would be a people who would testify even when they're not asked to testify. وَيَخُونُونَ وَلَا يُؤْتَمَنُونَ. And they would betray other people, and they would not be trustworthy people. The Prophet ﷺ is talking towards the end of time. And the Prophet ﷺ said, وَيَفْشُوا فِيهِمُ السَّمَنُ. And then obesity would be spread amongst them. And this hadith is in Sunnah Tirmidhi, it's an authentic hadith. And the ulama say that what the Prophet ﷺ meant by that last statement is that people become absolutely careless. And it's all about filling your own pocket and filling your own stomach. It's no longer about anyone else. So that's what the Prophet ﷺ meant when he said, وَيَفْشُوا فِيهِمُ السَّمَنُ. That people would become accustomed to that. That people don't care about anyone else anymore. It's all about me, 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 me. The more I can fill my pockets, the more I can fill my stomach. I don't care about anyone else. Dear brothers and sisters, I want to leave you with this story before I sit, and inshallah ta'ala afterwards we'll do the dua, because this is a very beautiful story and it's something that's very significant. Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he says that the Prophet ﷺ said, and this hadith is in al-Bukhari, it's a very beautiful story. Rasulullah ﷺ said that in the time of Bani Israel there were two men. And the Prophet ﷺ said, one asked the other for a loan of 1,000 dinars. One of them is asking the other for a loan of 1,000 dinars. And the second man responded and said, who is our witness? And the other man responded saying, Kafa billahi shahida. Allah is enough of a witness. He said, you know what, you're right. Then the man said, well, I want some sort of guarantee. Right? What if you can't pay the 1,000 dinars? And the man responded to him, Kafa billahi kafila. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is enough as a guarantor. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take care of it. And he said, you know what, you're right. Then the Prophet ﷺ said, so that man took that money, he worked with it, and then when he finished his job and he had the money left, he lived in another land, so he tried to look for a boat. He tried to look for someone to sail him across the seas so that he could go back to that man and give him his money at the date that was agreed upon. And he was unable to do so. He couldn't find any markab. He couldn't find anyone. So Rasulullah ﷺ said, the man took a piece of wood, and he saw the piece of wood, he opened it, and he put the 1,000 dinars inside of it. And he put a letter inside of it, explaining to whom it belonged, and also an explanation as to why he was sending it in this manner. And he closed it, and he taped it shut, and he looked up to the skies, and Rasulullah ﷺ said, he made a very beautiful dua. Rasulullah ﷺ said, he said, Allahumma innaka ta'lamu anni kuntu tasallaftu fulanan alfa dinar. He said, oh Allah, I know that you know that I took 1,000 dinars from this person. He said, فَسَأَلَنِي كَفِيلًا. And he asked me for a guarantor. فَقُلْتُ كَفَى بِاللَّهِ كَفِيلًا. And I said, Allah is enough of a guarantor. And he said, فَرَضِيَ بِكَ. Subhanallah. He said, so he was pleased with you. He said, وَسَأَلَنِي شَهِيدًا. And he asked me for a witness. فَقُلْتُ لَهُ كَفَى بِاللَّهِ شَهِيدًا. I said to him, Allah is enough of a witness. فَرَضِيَ بِكَ. So he was pleased with you, O Allah. And he said, and you know, O Allah, that I'm looking for some form of way to deliver the money to him, but I can't find it. فَلَمْ أَقْدِرْ. And he said, so I'm trusting you with this money. He put that wood into the waters. And at the same time, he made dua that it would reach the man, and at the same time, he continued to look for a way to get across to him, and he took another 1,000 dinars with him. Rasulullah ﷺ said that one day that man, he didn't worry about it. He was generous with his lending. He didn't worry about it. And this is something that the Prophet ﷺ praised, the person who gives a debt, and he's lenient with asking for it to be repaid. So he didn't worry about it too much. And he said one day that man came out of his house to see whether a ship had arrived bringing anything, and he said that he didn't see a ship. So the day that the ship was supposed to come with that man, he didn't see a ship. He said, but instead he saw this piece of wood. And Rasulullah ﷺ said, the man thought to himself, let me take this piece of wood home so I can make a fire out of it, so that it will cool us for the night. So Rasulullah ﷺ said he took this piece of wood home, and he cut the wood in half, and he found the 1,000 dinars, and he found the letter, and subhanAllah, he was pleased with that. He praised Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah returned it to him. In the meantime, the man is still trying to make his way over to him, to pay him back his 1,000 dinars. And the man comes to him after a few days, and he has another 1,000 dinars, and he apologizes. SubhanAllah, he doesn't even mention to him that I put anything in the waters. He doesn't even mention that to him. He apologized that he was late, and he explained his excuses that I couldn't find a way to get across. And then he handed the man another 1,000 dinars, and the man said to him, don't worry, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already delivered your 1,000 dinars. Allah has already delivered it. This hadith in Al-Bukhari shows us the amana of the lender and the amana of the one who had the money lended to him. It shows you what iman and faith can do to a person. And faith and iman, faith and trust go hand in hand. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us الإيمان والأمانة. اللهم آمين. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروا إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين والعاقبة للمتقين. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على عبدك ورسولك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات إنك سميع قريب مجيب الدعوات. اللهم اغفر لنا وارحمنا واعف عنا ولا تعذبنا. ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. اللهم اغفر لوالدينا رب ارحمهما كما ربونا صغارا. ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما. اللهم انصر المستضعفين في مشارق الأرض ومغاربها. اللهم أصلح أحوال إخواننا المنكوبين والمجاهدين والمستضعفين في كل مكان. اللهم عليك بأعدائك أعداء الدين. اللهم أهلك الظالمين بالظالمين واخرجنا وإخواننا من بينهم سالمين. عباد الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. فاذكروا الله يذكركم واشكروه على نعمه يزد لكم ولذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون. وأقيموا الصلاة.